What's up, everyone? Welcome back to C&D Sports. The MLB is well into the final month of the season, which means we're gearing up for the playoffs. So over the next few weeks, we'll get you set for the playoffs. The next 2 weeks will be contenders videos. This week, the AL, next week, the NL. Then we'll have some specifics on the teams that haven't necessarily solidified their spots yet. So wild card teams, close division races, we'll break those down in each league. And then we'll get you a formal preview in a few weeks' time, just before the playoffs start in early October. But today we're talking American League contenders, and the American League has been nothing short of exciting this year. A lot of new faces in the playoffs this year, a lot of teams that are sort of unexpected, both good and bad right now. So this video, we're not going to break down all six teams that are in because we're going to save the AL Central for later because frankly, it's not the most exciting division when it comes to the postseason. They're definitely the low end of the playoff picture right now. And I think with that three-horse race that's going on right now, that'll be something we touch on more in a few weeks when we talk about the AL wild card. We'll also probably include the Central in there because some of the wild card, all of the wild card teams, frankly, are better than those three Central teams. But again, you got to have a division winner from every division in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we're going to go in order here of how I view the contenders in terms of strength. So it's not necessarily the standings right now. Obviously, the top two division winners, they get a bye from the wild card round, but it is not in that order. So it'll be in terms of where I rank these teams in terms of strengths going into the postseason. So let's get started with the Houston Astros, the most controversial team in baseball.
Yep.
But the Houston Astros have proved this year that they are not their cheating scandal anymore. This is a new roster. This is a new and improved roster. And frankly, I think this is the best Houston Astros team that we've seen. I think they are the top contender right now in the American League. They seem to be, in my opinion, they're the best team in baseball right now, and I wouldn't pick against them. Are there teams that could beat them? Yeah, because you never know what happens in October. But right now, I think they're the best. So we'll start with their lineup right now. And overall, the top end of this lineup is scary. You know, with Jose Altuve, he's really kind of found his groove again. He's not at his MVP form that he was once at, but he's found a home at the top of this order. And really just kind of revitalized his career. Jeremy Pena has really filled the gap for Carlos Correa. That was a huge question mark. Carlos Correa obviously going to Minnesota this offseason left a huge hole. Houston did not fill that in free agency. They felt that Jeremy Pena internally could come through, and he is definitely going to be up for Rookie of the Year this year. I don't think he'll get that. We'll talk about who I think will get it when we later, because we will touch on him. But Jeremy Pena has been solid, and Yordan Alvarez rounding out that top three. He's the best left-handed hitter in baseball, and if he wasn't a DH, he would certainly be in the MVP conversation. And then to have experienced guys like Bregman, like Tucker, Gurriel, and even Trey Mancini, bringing him in at the deadline. Those are guys that you want in your order. These are certainly guys that are built for October. And I think rounding it out at the bottom there with Martin Maldonado, it's nice that the Astros have that flexibility at catcher that if they start Maldonado, which they most likely will because he has done great things with that pitching staff, which we'll touch on in a second. So I think defensively you'll want Martin Maldonado in there. But then once you go to that bullpen, they won't have to hesitate, and they can go to Christian Vasquez, who is that better bat that they brought in at the deadline, certainly has the same amount of experience as Martin Maldonado playing with those playoff Red Sox teams. Christian Vasquez, they really have something that was probably their weak point at the beginning of the year. They now have options at catcher, and I think catchers can be very important with pitching being magnified so much more in the playoffs. I think that is probably the understated part of this lineup that the Astros have pitching options that can help them both defensively and offensively.
One thing you'll notice about the Astros going top to bottom is they don't really have any holes.
No, they really don't. These are guys that you look at a guy like Yuli Gurriel, has he had the greatest of years? No. You look at a guy like Bregman, is he the Alex Bregman that he was in 2019 or even 2017? No, he's still very good, an all-star caliber player, but I think you look at that, and these are all guys that have been there before, and on the big stage, they have showed up. So I think as long as you have that guy anchoring your lineup, which they do in Yordan Alvarez, I think as long as you have those solid playoff pieces, which they do, I think everything will come together for the Astros. And the scary thing is, the Astros lineup is not even their strong suit.
Yes.
I think their strong suit is that rotation, led by none other than the ageless wonder himself, Justin Verlander, who's on the shelf right now. More precautionary. They feel good that he'll be back for the playoffs. More Justin Verlander now gets to rest up for what should be a deep run in October.
That's
I mean,
scary.
the man's in his late 30s and he is going to win the Cy Young this year,
Yeah.
unless Shane McClanahan does something to really steal that from him in Tampa. Justin Verlander is going to win the Cy Young this year, and he's looked unhittable. The stuff is just nasty. And you look down the rest of this rotation. I have Urquidy and Garcia moving to the bullpen. They kind of roll with a flexible rotation. It can be six guys that can start. Right now, they have Hunter Brown in there just with Justin Verlander. So they have seven guys that could start. But I think these are the four you feel the most comfortable with, especially with Lance McCullers coming back from injury and pitching the way he does. Framber Valdez is a guy that in the past has been more of a swingman for them, has been one of those setup guys in the pen that can eat up he can be in a setup role, he can be in that swing role, where he has in the past taken over after their starter goes three, maybe four innings. But Framber Valdez, I think, is going to be that impact lefty that a lot of teams look for in the postseason. You look at the Braves last year, and they were really led by that impact lefty and Max Fried. I think Framber Valdez can be that type of guy, and he has been that type of guy in the regular season. Just a fantastic year for him. And then rounding it out with Lance McCullers and Christian Javier, there's not many teams that can touch that rotation, a very, very impressive and almost unhittable rotation. And then they have that benefit that their lineup is so strong and they have the guys in the bullpen that can really come in and close games out too. They really do everything well. So let's look at that bullpen now.
Yeah.
Ryan Presley, he should be back for the playoffs. I would, and obviously he's done such a great job in that closing role right now. But if there are some doubts with him coming back from injury, they went and they picked up Will Smith, the World Series winning closer last year. And again, he's just that go-to lefty guy out of the pen that, we've seen Will Smith do it in the past. Guys like Aroldis Chapman in years past. He's really that impact lefty that can come in and get you outs when it matters most. Rafael Montero and Hector Neris have also been in setup roles. Hector Neris has been in a closing role with the Phillies in the past. So they have guys that have proven it this year with the Astros that they're certainly capable of eating up big innings. But in the past too, they've had even higher leverage situations as well. Brian Abreu and Phil Maton. Again, this Astros team, because they make so many deep runs, what is it now, 5 years in a row? It seems like virtually every year they make the ALCS, and basically every other year they're in the World Series. So they certainly have a lot of guys that may not have the major league tenure that we're used to seeing with teams that are this strong, but they're guys that, they have the playoff tenure. And then Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy are guys that, if you do get roughed up by a Seattle, if you do get roughed up by a Toronto, and, your starters kind of, I guess, do the unthinkable at this case because Houston's starting rotation has been so strong, you do have guys that have proven that they can eat up 3, 4, 5, even 6 innings if they have to. Um, and that is Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy, who you feel comfortable with. You may not feel comfortable with them. You may feel I wouldn't say not comfortable. You feel more comfortable with the four guys that I kind of think will be in there for rotations, giving them the ball um, at the beginning of the game, first pitch. But Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy are guys that I think you feel comfortable with. If you get in a jam, these guys can come in and they can eat up, 3 innings. And that's something that is very much more of a part of the postseason right now.
Yep.
That if guys get in a jam, managers aren't afraid to make that switch and immediately go to that pen. So I think Houston just does everything very, very well. And there really isn't a weak spot in this team.
No.
So that's why I have them as probably the most threatening contender in the
Yep.
American League. Could they be beat? I think there are some teams that, if they on a good day could get the Astros, but that's just, with any team. Remember the Washington Nationals won a World Series as the last team in the playoffs. You look at the Braves last year, they had the worst record out of all 10 teams in the playoffs and still won the World Series. So teams can be beatable, but Houston is, I think, the most poised to make another run to the CS.
Yeah, and then we'll move on to Seattle here, and it's a bit of a drop off, but still formidable.
I don't think it's as big of a drop off as people would think. Now, obviously, Seattle being a wild card team, it kind of I hate the connotation that wild card can have. You didn't win your division. Well, they're also playing in a division with Houston, so it's very hard to win in that division. But I think Seattle has been at certain times of the year, they've been up there with the likes of the Dodgers, with the likes of the Astros, the Mets, as being just one of those absolutely deadly looking teams. And you saw that they looked dead in the water before the All-Star break, and then went on that massive 14-game winning streak going into the All-Star break that really put them back in the conversation. And they've been one of the better teams in baseball since that. And you look at that lineup, I touched on Jeremy Pena being up for Rookie of the Year. They're led off by the Rookie of the Year this year, Julio Rodriguez, who is just an all-around. He's a power threat. Guy can run the bases. The guy can field well. He really is a five-tool type of guy leading off that lineup at such a young age. Obviously now signing what could be, if all the incentives and all the options come into play, the largest ever contract in baseball, just a massive, what could be, I believe it's a 15-year deal or something like that, but guaranteed 8 years. This is the cornerstone of the franchise, and he's really shown it this year. And there's a reason why he's leading off this order, setting the table for guys like Ty France, Mitch Haniger, Eugenio Suarez, and Jesse Winker. That's a deadly top five there that can really do damage to you if you're not careful. You have to pitch carefully, and that's what you need in the playoffs. You need something that can really set the table and set the tone early in a game, and they have that top five that can do that. And I mean, the bottom of the order is nothing to shy away from. Carlos Santana, he's a guy that's been in these situations before, especially when you look at that Cleveland team that made the World Series in 2016. He was obviously a huge piece there. Adam Frazier can be a scary bat, and JP Crawford, rounding out the order. This was a guy who was at one point had, you could argue that he was the best shortstop in baseball at the start of the year. He just had those great hitting numbers. He's a good defender. But to have him setting the table at the bottom of the order, to go back to Rodriguez, to go back to Ty France and Mitch Haniger, I think that's something that could be big too, to really get those rallies going. I really like this Mariners lineup. And then moving to the rotation, I like the rotation a lot more. I think this is a rotation that can go toe to toe on the right day with the Houston Astros. Luis Castillo obviously would be leading it off. He has just been everything and more that they could have asked for when they made that trade deadline deal with the Reds. He has been phenomenal. And then second in that order, you're throwing it off to last year's Cy Young winner, So that's frightening. One of the better lefties in the game, Robbie Ray. Again, a rough start to the year, but he's really picked it up and he's really looked maybe not Cy Young caliber, but certainly an all-star caliber. And that's all you can ask for out of your two in a playoff rotation. And then the future of that rotation with Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. I put Gilbert ahead of him just because he did get that all-star nod in his very young career right now. But you could go either way, interchange those two, three, or four. Their stuff is nasty. George Kirby looks fantastic over his past few starts right now. Logan Gilbert having a great start against the White Sox the other day. That rotation, again, can go toe to toe with just about anybody in the MLB right now. And this is why I think that they are the biggest threat to the Astros making a run to the World Series. And then that's not even mentioning their bullpen. Their bullpen, Paul Sewald has been a very capable closer this year. Eric Swanson, Diego Castillo, Andres Munoz at times look untouchable in the back end there. And I think Matt Brash is a big thing to talk about. This is a guy that could very well have made their rotation to start the year. Some people predicted that maybe he was going to be their fifth starter. They found him a bullpen role, and to have a guy that has starting stuff in the bullpen that has really fit in and made a home for himself. Seattle's going to have some questions in the offseason. Do they want to develop him as a starter, or have they found the next impact reliever? Because Matt Brash is having a fantastic year. And then having Marco Gonzalez, who is their fifth starter, moving into their bullpen. The fact that he's a lefty is great because it gives them another lefty option when they do have to face a righty heavy lineup. I look at the Blue Jays being one of them. That certainly could come into play. It's just a different look for them. But obviously, the Mariners bullpen is something that I think, again, just like the Astros, they are complete. Are they complete to the same degree as the Astros? Maybe not. But again, this is a team that if anyone has a shot to beat the Astros, I think Seattle has the best shot to beat the Astros and make the World Series.
Okay. And then we're going to move on to the AL East here. And who do you want to kick it off with?
Well, we'll kick it off with Toronto because as much as Toronto has had their struggles against Tampa, you look at this team and Toronto should be the clear-cut, more threatening looking lineup and rotation than Tampa. But again, Tampa throws out guys that can do everything and somehow they throw things at the wall and they make it stick. Tampa finds a way to win. But I think Toronto is probably a little bit of a bigger threat right now. Just because, again, you look at that lineup with George Springer leading off, obviously an MVP candidate last year, and Vlad Guerrero Jr., who is having, I guess, by his definition, a down year, still a very productive year. Bo Bichette's really come to life the past few weeks, and that's a good sign going into the playoffs there. Guys like Teoscar Hernandez, like Matt Chapman, the All-Star, and Alejandro Kirk, Lourdes Gurriel. The bottom of their order has an All-Star second baseman in Santiago Espinal. This is a complete lineup. This might be one of the most complete lineups in baseball right now. You could make the argument it's the most complete lineup in the American League for sure. This is a lineup that can go toe to toe with just about anyone. But the big problem for this Jays lineup, and really for the Jays in general, is the consistency. They have stretches where they can't, it looks like they can't lose. Everything's hitting, similar to the stretch they're on now. But then they've had stretches in the past where they're their own worst enemy. When one guy stops hitting, it really starts a ripple effect. You saw it recently with Alejandro Kirk. This is a guy that they were pleasantly surprised about. He was supposed to be kind of a bench option, really broke through as their number one catcher. Had that all-star starting appearance, and then since the all-star break hasn't really hit well, and you've kind of seen that ripple effect in the lineup. Other guys have stepped up, like Matt Chapman, obviously, but you even see down years from Guerrero and Bichette. And you can see when they get in slumps, you can really see it throughout the lineup that they're a team that can, hit the stuffing out of the ball, or they just can't hit
Yeah.
on any given night. And you really have to hone that in, and you really have to have that consistency in the playoffs, because you're not going to get to face teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates. You're not going to get to face teams like the Kansas City Royals. You're going to have to play a great team night in and night out. So that's something that the lineup definitely needs to work on. I think the righty heaviness in the lineup is a problem. Um, if you're all you got to do is just continually put righties out there, and they have guys that can certainly hit both, but it certainly helps if you just throw right-handed pitching out there. It can neutralize some of these bats a little bit. So the righty heavy lineup isn't ideal, but that's something that they've played through all year. It's been a concern all year, and they've still somehow found a way to be, well in this playoff conversation, and really they're at that point where they can prepare for the playoffs now. Obviously, there's some teams knocking on the door, but I think the postseason, the wild card picture at least, is pretty safe. So I mean, the Jays have really, all those criticisms they had at the start of the year and even at the deadline, we need more lefty bats. Well, the righty bats are still hitting, and they're still hitting everyone. So I have to applaud them for that. I think what I get most excited about with the Jays, though, is that rotation, and certainly the top end of that rotation. Alek Manoah has been a stud this year. Alek Manoah is a guy that will be top 3 in Cy Young voting, in my opinion, behind Verlander and McClanahan. But he has been no schlub this year. Just phenomenal in a year that Jose Barrios taking a huge step back and losing the Cy Young winner in Robbie Ray. Um, there was definitely the need early on for a number one starter, and he really filled that ace role. So Alek Manoah is probably the pitcher I'm most excited to watch, um, when he takes the mound for game one of the wild card series, or if they make it past the wild card series, when he takes the mound in the DS. He's a guy that I will lock in and watch their start to finish for sure. He's just that special impact guy. And then Kevin Gossman has really been, at the start of the year, he was great. I mean, took a few steps back. Obviously, he had a ridiculous start to the year. Took a few steps back, but he's really found that consistency again. Certainly worthy of being a number 2 in a playoff rotation. And then you get to Jose Barrios, who's starting to find it now. You're starting to see that, but he has been frankly atrocious on the road this year. Again, he's starting to find his footing, but it really it's not the greatest when we're talking about a pitcher finding their footing when there's only 4 weeks left in the season. So Jose Barrios is a guy that, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved Ross Stripling up if it's a deciding game in game 3. If they get to that point of game 3 of the wild card series, remember it's a best of 3 series. So I could see them being more confident in Ross Stripling, just with the way he's pitched since coming back off the injured list, and kind of going with Ross Stripling for 4 innings and then doing more of the bullpen day that day. But Ross Stripling has been fantastic. So at least they do have that flexibility that if you're not confident with Barrios going into the playoffs, you could go with Ross Stripling. But I do expect, you sign Barrios to this big money 7-year deal. He's starting to find his footing. I do think he certainly has the capabilities to be that guy in the playoffs. The thing that I have an issue with the Blue Jays, it's been their bullpen. And I like Jordan Romano in the end, but man, can he give Jays fans heart attacks when he comes in to close the game. He does not make it easy on himself. He can put the first 2 batters on and then, strike out the side after that, but he doesn't make it easy for himself. He's definitely an unconventional type of closer. But Jordan Romano is, you feel okay. If you're in a situation where Jordan Romano comes into the game, you feel like you've won the game. He's not going to blow as many saves as he's going to get. And then I think their setup guys and Jimmy Garcia and the newly acquired Anthony Bass. I think you feel confident with that back 3. I don't think they have that impact left-hander out of the bullpen that other teams in the American League have and other teams that have won World Series or made deep playoff runs have had in the past. I like Tim Mesa. I'm just not sure he's that guy. I don't think Tim Mesa doesn't have that postseason experience as well. It's not like a Will Smith or an Aroldis Chapman in the past. Tim Mesa is a guy that, do you feel confident that he's your first lefty out of the pen? Probably not. But, he's the best they've got right now, and he's had a solid year. So, and then Adam Simber, the same thing. He's a guy that can come in and get you out of jams. But Adam Simber's a guy that has looked hittable before in the past. So having only three guys out of the pen, if Jose Barrios has a bad day, if Ross Stripling can only go 4 innings, then you really have to rely on other guys in that pen. And obviously, they've got a bigger bullpen than this. These are just the 5 key guys that you look at. But do you feel comfortable going to a Julian Merriweather, to a Zach Pop? I hope you don't feel comfortable going to Yusei Kikuchi because he's been garbage this year. But that's that. There's a lot of questions around that bullpen. I think David Phelps is another guy you can look at that maybe you do feel a little more confident with him, but the bullpen, I think, is where the Blue Jays, I think that's why they're below the Mariners, in my opinion. Could they finish above the Mariners? Yes. Could they win their division? Well, the Yankees look terrible right now. So, yes, there is a shot that they could win this division. But I think this is where they are separated from the Astros and the Mariners. And they've got a strong lineup. They've got a slightly lesser, but you could argue that they've got a strong rotation. But it's that bullpen that I think has a lot of question marks that really puts them in the kind of the 3 hole in terms of a threat for me.
All right, now we'll move on to the Tampa Bay Rays.
And the Tampa Bay Rays, you look at this lineup and, outside of, say, a Wander Franco or a Brandon Lau, there's not a lot to get excited about. But this is the same style of lineup that made the World Series and was won Kevin Cash not pulling Blake Snell out in the 7th inning from winning that World Series. I think they were the better team. They were better than that very good Dodgers team. And, Blake Snell was dealing. I don't know why he took him out, but that's besides the point. The Rays find ways to win. The Rays find ways to defy all odds with such a low payroll and constantly put themselves in deep postseason conversations and World Series conversations. And I think this year's no different. Have they taken a step back? Well, yeah, they have. They were the best team in the American League last year. So they've taken a step back in that sense, but I think there are certainly guys to get excited about in that lineup. Brandon Lau, Wander Franco. You look at Randy Arozarena, who in that World Series run had just a phenomenal, just setting a record-setting postseason there. Newly acquired David Peralta. There are guys in this lineup that you can get excited about, even though on paper it does not look great. But there are certainly guys with postseason pedigree. Kevin Cash is a very capable manager most of the time. And so Kevin Cash is that type of guy that he will find the right way to use this lineup. So the Rays are always a threat, and the fact that they're surging at this time certainly bodes well for them. And then moving to that rotation, Shane McClanahan, I think, is going to be the runner-up for Cy Young. Just a brilliant, again, that impact lefty starter, like a Max Fried that you look for in a rotation. And Corey Kluber is, by all definitions, this is a down year for Corey Kluber, but I still think he's a guy that you feel comfortable that can get you 4 innings. As I was listening to another podcast the other day, and I heard something that that someone said about the Rays, and they said the Rays have a lot of guys that can get you 3 fantastic innings out of the bullpen, or whether that's a starter like a Corey Kluber or like a Jeffrey Springs. And that's all they need, because they do have those impact guys that in the bullpen, they have such a big bullpen that they can then go and rely on that bullpen like they would have to if in a four-man rotation to go with a guy like Yanni Chirinos or to go with a guy like JT Chargois or to go with a guy like Ryan Yarbrough. That really is just an opener. So the Rays have truly set the tone for openers, especially in the postseason. And I think the Rays, even though on paper it doesn't look like a threatening rotation, outside of McClanahan, it certainly is a threatening rotation. And then the bullpen, like we've talked about, the reliance on the bullpen with opening games is certainly something to look at. I think Pete Fairbanks and Jason Adam have done a great job at the back end there. And then Brooks Raley and Colin Posh um, really form a strong back end of that rotation that will get you over the line with McClanahan games, that should get you over the line with Kluber games. And then you have those guys that could open and could heat up a lot of innings like JT Chargois, like Yanni Chirinos, like Ryan Yarbrough. And they have multiple impact lefty relievers that I think can really make a name for themselves this postseason. Um, like a lot of Rays relievers have in the past. They find guys that no one's ever heard about truly embracing the Moneyball role, and they find ways to win. And a lot of it comes from that bullpen. So the Rays on paper don't look great, but they are no schlubs.
Not at all. And let's wrap it up here with the New York Yankees.
The most injured team in baseball. This team had a 15 and a half game lead at the All-Star break. That has dwindled to, I believe, as we film right now, I believe it's 4 games the Rays are back from them. So they've been atrocious the second half of the year. And it has not been Aaron Judge's fault. The guy has been the clear-cut MVP this year. He's really put this team on his back. I think they're struggling really solidifies his MVP because he's the only reason they're still in the conversation, that we're in September and they still have a division lead. Right now, guys like DJ LeMahieu, Giancarlo Stanton, Anthony Rizzo are all injured. You'll look at their bullpen, especially too, has faced a fair share of injuries this year. I think if they're healthy and they're hitting on all cylinders, this is a team that could be a threat. I almost hesitated to put them in this video though, because they just can't hit. They can't stay healthy and they can't hit sometimes even when they are healthy. They're just a completely different team from someone that looked like a World Series frontrunner at the start of the year with the likes of the Astros and the Dodgers and the Mets. And now they're suddenly a team that I don't feel confident if they get into a wild card series of winning that. And I certainly don't feel confident about them winning a divisional series, even if they do somehow find a way to keep that 2 seed and get that bye. But overall, there are things to get excited about with the names like LeMahieu, Judge, Stanton, Rizzo, Donaldson, Jose Trevino, with that All-Star year this year behind the plate. But there are a lot of question marks like a Gleyber Torres, and Aaron Hicks, a Kiner Falefa, even guys like Donaldson, even guys like LeMahieu, who have had down years as well. This is a lineup that I don't know where the runs are going to come from, but they are capable of scoring runs, and that's why they have to be considered a contender. Also, when your postseason rotation is led off by Garrett Cole, who time in and time out has been one of the better starters in baseball. Sorry, Garrett Cole. You feel confident giving him the ball game one. But again, this has been somewhat of a down year for him. He's looked a lot more hittable. Nestor Cortez had an all-star year, second half of the year. He struggled a bit more, but he could be that impact lefty starter that you look for. Frankie Montas has been solid. I don't think he's been exactly what the Yankees expected when they traded for him at the deadline. And the Yankees are going to regret trading away Jordan Montgomery for Harrison Bader, because he would have been probably their second best pitcher the way he's pitching in St. Louis right now. We'll talk about him more next week when we talk about NL contenders, but they're going to regret that, I think. And their rotation doesn't look as strong as maybe it did at the start of the year. And the bullpen, I think there's definitely some question marks there. Clay Holmes coming back is huge, but how's he going to come back from injury? He's looked okay so far, but we'll see. Jonathan Loaizaga had a down year in the back end. Wandy Peralta has had a down year. Lou Trevino's been all right. Aroldis Chapman's still out with that, leg infection from a tattoo injury. You don't hear that too often, but so Maybe he won't be back. Ron Marinaccio has been great. Lucas Litke has been solid. Scott Efros has been solid, but they don't have a guy that I'm necessarily terrified of coming out of the pen. Not like that, that four man back end of that Braves bullpen last year, which was so threatening that once you got to them, or like those when the Royals were making the playoffs, when they had that 4-man back end of the bullpen. Um, I don't see that threat with the Yankees. So I mean, the way I've been talking about the Yankees, they almost shouldn't be on this list. But when you have a guy like Aaron Judge that can win you ball games like that, you have to keep them on this list. And I think if the Yankees find a way in the next 3 weeks to hold on to that division and build on that division lead, maybe I'll feel more confident about them. And that's why I've included them on this list. But it's scary times in the Bronx.
Their lineup looks a little thin, so I think your take is very rational. I mean, if you can't play through injuries, it
Yeah,
shows how a lack of depth, really. So I don't
exactly.
see them as really a threat at all, but we'll see.
We'll see. And obviously, these are my contenders here. We'll talk more about each specific team as we get closer to the playoffs. We'll talk about the Central more. We'll talk about more teams that are still in the wild card race, like the Baltimore Orioles. And we will certainly, in weeks to come, get you geared up for this postseason. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, give it a like down below, subscribe so you don't miss any of our other uploads. Comment down below what you think of our takes on the contenders. Who'd we leave off? Who do you think? What's your order of contenders this year? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.
Peace.